Hi everybody, welcome to Be Fit, Stay Fit America. I'm Dr. Paul Kennedy. Last week we showed you lots of different exercises for training the shoulders. And today we'd like to complete the series for shoulder training by showing you an exercise called the shrug. And we're going to show you at least 3 different ways to do the shrug. And shrugging is really a great way to complete or finish off the shoulder training series. Now, the muscle we're going to be working with is called the trapezius muscle. And that's the muscle that originates near the base of the neck. Actually, it goes partway down the spine and inserts on the shoulder on the outside edge. Its job is to elevate the shoulders and also to draw the shoulders back. We're going to show you some exercises on how to do that. I've got one set up already. This is a barbell inside a power rack, so we're nice and safe. We've got the rack all set up. I'm going to show you the technique. Now with shrugging, we want to make sure that our arms are hanging straight down from the shoulders. They're not real wide or real narrow. I'm going to pick up the barbell, pick it up, step outside the machine. Now, for good shrugging technique, we want the upper body slightly bent forward with the chin down. I'm going to take the weight up under control, pause, and back down slowly and feel that stretch on the outside part of the shoulders. You see that? You almost feel it. Up under control, and then pause and down in about 3 to 4 seconds and feel that stretch. So here's our shrug, up, and then down under control. We're looking for 1 to 3 sets of 8 to 12 repetitions with whatever resistance where you can reach momentary fatigue within that repetition range. So you can see the shrug is not a difficult exercise to do, but don't lean back and don't rock back and forth. Just tilt slightly at the waist, drop that chin, and really drive it right into the trapezius muscle. And that'll help you with not only elevating the shoulder, but also it helps you with your posture. All right, let me put this one down and show you another way to do it. We're simply going to, instead of using barbells, we're going to go to dumbbells. I'm going to pick up the dumbbells, put them at my side. I'm going to tilt them forward slightly, and again, here's that position, slightly bent at the waist, chin down. Now I'm going to face you. Here we go. Up under control, pause, down 4, 3, 2, 1. Feel the stretch. Up under control. So you can do this. This is not very hard to do. All the way down under control. Again, we're doing a shrug by lifting or contracting the trapezius muscle and elevating our shoulders. Great for keeping that head back and improving your posture. But there's another way. If you can't get to the fitness center or you don't want to use dumbbells or barbells, here's our trusty rubber tubing. I've used one that's a little bit thicker than we've been using in this series, and in order to get the resistance that I need, I'm going to spread my feet a little bit farther apart to make it a little bit tougher to pull on. So I'm going to stand up. Here's my technique. Slightly bent at the waist, chin down, and shrug. Up under control, pause, then down 4, 3, 2, 1 to a stretch. Up under control, and down 4, 3, 2, 1. The shrug, a great way to finish off that shoulder series and make sure that your entire shoulder area is completely trained. Welcome back. We're going to start training the hips now. We're going to be all over the fitness center, and we're also going to show you a couple exercises you can do right in your own home for your hips. Now, the prototypical exercise for the hips is the squat. Just a word of caution. If you've not used a squat before as an exercise, make sure you get proper instruction. We're going to want to make sure you get some of that today on the show. And notice that I've set up the barbell. We're going to start with a squat, but I've set up the barbell inside the power rack. This is a power rack, and these are safety bars. I've got it set up on the rack above here. That's adjusted for my height. And in case something would happen and I come down to the bottom of the lift, I can let the bar go, and the safety bars is what is going to save me from injuring myself. If you have not done a squat before, I want you to start with an empty bar. Just practice the technique. Make sure you have good supervision and a spotter, and practice your technique before you start adding barbells. Please do that for me so you stay safe. Now, the hip. When we train the hip, we want to try to simulate any exercise that allows our body to move from this position to here, or from this position to here, or ideally from this position all the way back to this position. Because the muscle that draws our femur, the upper leg bone, from here all the way back across the body is the gluteal or the buttocks muscle. It allows us to flex all the way through. So you're going to be seeing a lot of different exercises we're going to do today, and each time we see that exercise, I want you to notice what position the upper thigh bone is in, where it starts and where it finishes, and you'll notice that it's usually going to be going through this position. So again, any exercise that allows you to do this is going to help to train those gluteals, and the more we can isolate it, the more training we get right to that buttocks, that gluteal muscle that we're always trying to train. Let's start with the squat. Now again, I'm inside a safety rack, a power rack. When I take position here, I'm going to put my hands pretty wide, just outside of shoulder width apart. I'm going to squat underneath the bar. I'm going to stand up and move forward away from the rack. My feet are a little bit outside of shoulder width apart, and my toes are pointed slightly outward. I'm going to squat down slowly under control until my upper thigh bone reaches parallel. Pause, and come back up under control. Don't allow your body to lean forward. Keep your head up, all the way down under control, and pause, all the way back up. Now notice, I'm not locking my knees. I want to keep the pressure on my gluteals. That way I don't have to use a lot of heavy weight. We can make less weight do more work by not allowing ourselves to lock the knees and going down in about 3 to 4 seconds, pausing, coming back up in 1 to 2 seconds. We were looking for 1 to 3 sets of 10 to 15 repetitions. We're using a slightly higher repetition range now because we're training the lower body. Remember in our series earlier, we mentioned to you that upper body training requires 8 to 12 repetitions, but lower body training with the squat or any other exercise with the hips or legs requires about 10 to 15 repetitions. Really simple to do. Now I want to show you another way to train the hips using a squatting movement. Remember, you don't have to have a lot of resistance to make the muscles work. A lot of people don't understand that when you do a squat and you don't lock out, you are keeping the pressure on your gluteals, your buttocks muscles, and that's what we want to do. So let's try something really simple, and I'll bet all of you can do this. We're going to simply do the same squatting movement I just did, but we're going to do it with the slow speed that we usually use with our technique. Start with your hands on your hips. Don't allow yourself to lock out. Notice how I just sort of brought my knees right out of that locked position, and I'm not going to allow myself to lock out for about a minute or so when I go through the whole exercise. Start with your hands on your hips, and here we go. We're going to go down in about 3 to 4 seconds. Pause, try to keep that head up, don't lean forward, pause, and come back up in about 1 to 2 seconds. Don't lock out, all the way back down in about 3 to 4 seconds. By slowing down the movement pattern, we're keeping all the pressure on the legs and the hips, the gluteals. And you'll find that after about 6, 8, maybe 10 repetitions of doing this exercise under control, you're going to get a significant amount of tension into your gluteals, into your buttocks. And you can see it's not that hard to do. Now, for those of you who are trying this at home, or those of you who want to do it at home and you're a little bit concerned about the balance, there's a real easy way we can solve that too. I'm going to show you a real simple way with something you have right around the house right now to train. All I'm going to do is use a broomstick. I took the broom off the end, but if you're having a little bit of difficulty with balance, you can either use a broomstick or even a chair and do the same exercise. All the way down under control, use the broomstick for balance, and back up under control. You see how easy that is? And after about 6 or 8 repetitions, maybe 10 or 12, depending on your level of fitness, you'll find that you're going to start to feel a little bit of a burn in those hips and a little bit of a burn in the thighs. And that's how we can train using a squat movement without having to use a heavy barbell. So give that a try at home. I think you'll find it easy to do. Now, another exercise that a lot of people have used in recent years for the hips is called the lunge. And with a lunge, all we need is a simple set of dumbbells. It doesn't have to be very heavy. I'm going to do it both sideways and toward the camera so you can see the technique. Whenever we do a lunge, we want to step forward, bend at the hip. Remember that movement I showed you before? We want to go from this position and bring the hip back up. Here's our lower position with the hip. You notice that my knees are no farther than my toes in the forward movement. I'm going to press back and stand. Now I'm going to step forward with my opposite foot all the way down, pause, and back up. Now notice that I keep my back as straight as possible. I try to maintain that vertical position, and what we'll find is as we step forward and down and back up, we're going to put a little bit of pressure on our hips. Now I'm going to do it facing the camera so you get a little bit better idea. We're stepping forward, pause, head up. Want to keep that back vertical and push back. Just alternate feet, and we're looking at doing 10 to 15 repetitions with both sides, both right and then with our left. The lunge, a simple exercise to do your hips. Now, let's go over to another part of the room. We're going to show you even a few more ways to train those hips. We've shown you some real simple ways to train the hips using barbells, dumbbells, and even just using your body weight. But there's lots of other ways in the fitness center to train your hips. This is one of my favorite machines. It's a back-lying, barbell-loaded leg press. It's real simple to use, but let me show you some of the features first of all. We load the barbells on the top, and the good thing about a leg press is it takes away some of the spinal problems associated with the squat. Whenever you're doing a squat, you're actually putting the weight that you're trying to drive into your hips on top of your spinal column, and your spinal column is not as strong as your hips. With a leg press, we eliminate most of that problem because we're lying on our back and the weight is forward. So it really is sort of a squat upside down, if you will. And this type of machine is nothing more than a more efficient barbell. And that's what really machines are. They're just efficient ways of using resistance that we used to use years ago by just using a barbell. So let's take a look at how the leg press works. I've already loaded a little bit of resistance on here. And remember, because it's a lower body exercise, we want to use a 10 to 15 repetition range, and we're going to use 1 to 3 sets for our workout. Now, if you're using the quick set system, and it's in the book, then Be Fit, Stay Fit, you'll remember that the quick set system is a very efficient and easy way for you to get all of your set work in a very brief period of time. So take a look at that too. Let's take our position. I'm going to sit down in the back of the leg press. My feet go right on the pad, and just like the position I had with the squat when we were over at the power rack, I'm going to keep my feet about shoulder width, maybe slightly wider apart, with my toes slightly turned out. Now, every leg press machine has a safety stop, and this one's no exception. Let me see if I can show you to you right here. We push it up a little bit. It has a flap. We turn it up, catch the barbell when we want to come out, and when we're ready to lift, we simply push our leg up. So we've already got it preset. Turn it to the outside, and now we'll start to do the lifting technique. Just like we did with the squat, we want to grasp on the side here and stabilize our body and come down slowly under control. Pause, and then back up in 1 to 2 seconds. Now notice, I didn't, watch my knees, I didn't lock out. I came slightly to an unlocked position. That's going to keep the pressure on my gluteals and on my quadriceps. Those are the muscles that we're trying to train, but primarily we're trying to train the gluteals. And remember, as we mentioned earlier in the show, whenever my leg goes to this position, my upper leg bone, and it goes back to a straighter position, I'm using my gluteal muscle to bring that femur, that upper leg bone, back into alignment. That's how we know we're training the hips. Let's try it again. Here we go. Down under control. In a good controlled movement, pause, exhale on exertion, don't quite lock out, and back down under control. Now normally we would do a weight that we can handle 10 to 15 times, with 15 being very challenging. Once we can do more than 15 repetitions, it's time to take the weight up. Depending where you start, that could take a few workouts or maybe even a few weeks. Up under control and back down slowly, pause, and back up under control. And each time we're making that thigh bone come up, and then we're making it extend forward and then back toward the back of our gluteals, and that helps us to really involve that muscle a lot more. When we're done, we simply push straight up, bring the flaps in, lock out, and we've completed the exercise. If we're using the quick set system, we would reduce the weight by about 25 or 30%, reseat ourselves in the leg press, and continue leg pressing. Now, I want to show you another way to do the leg press in a seated position. Let's go take a look. Now, so far we've used a barbell as a modality for training the hips. Then we went over to a back-lying barbell-loaded leg press. Remember, it's just an efficient barbell. And now we're going to a machine that's an even more efficient way of getting the resistance to our hips. This is a seated, selectorized leg press. It's real simple to use. I've noted that the position here so that I want to make sure I'm at about 90 degrees with my upper leg bone and my lower leg bone. We don't want to go too much farther. Now, it is possible to go way, way down and make it a deep pressing movement, but in many cases, there's a little bit of a cantilevering movement that can sometimes damage the knee joint. So we want to make sure that our seat setting is set such that when we come down, we're just about 90 degrees. That makes it easier for us. Our foot position is just like it would be with the leg press or with the squat, where we want to be slightly outside of shoulder width apart and our toes turned just slightly outward. Now, in this case, instead of the weight going up and down, the seat is going to move. I'm going to set the weight by reaching over to the weight stack, using the pin, and putting the weight into the weight machine, and I can select any one I want, and that hence the name selectorize machine. Now, I'm going to be choosing a resistance that I want to be able to do 10 to 15 repetitions, where again, the 15th repetition is very challenging. Once we can go beyond 15 with good form, we want to be able to increase the weight. We're going to do 1 to 3 sets of properly performed exercise, and yes, this is an exercise where we can use the quick set system. Let's give it a try. Here we go. Up under control. We're going to pause and come back down in about 4, 3, 2, 1. Back up under control, and you notice I don't lock out. I keep the pressure on my hips all the way back down, and we're going to look at 1 to 3 sets of 10 to 15 repetitions. When I reach momentary muscular fatigue, if I want to use that quick set system, I simply stop, reach over, reduce the amount of weight on the weight stack, and continue to lift. Up under control and back down under control. A seated leg press, a really simple way to train your hips. Now, let's go to another machine where we're going to train the outer portions of the hips, called the hip abductor. We've shown you several techniques for training the gluteus maximus, the large muscle of the gluteals, which helps to extend the hip. Now we're going to concentrate on one right on the side of the hip called the gluteus medius. I'm inside a machine called a hip abductor. Abduction means that any movement that goes from the midline and moves away from the midline. That's known as an abductive exercise. Let me show you how this machine works. I've got my thighs against the outer pads. I'm going to adjust the setting so that we start in the inside position. In other words, at the midline of the body. I've set the weight on the weight stack. We're doing a selectorized machine. That means we can select the weight on the weight stack. I'm going to grasp my hands here to stabilize my hips. I'm going to push out under control, pause, and come back in under control. Each time I do that, I'm putting all the pressure on both sides of my hips, the gluteus medius. Its job is to abduct or pull the thighs away from the midline of the body. And you can see we're doing it by putting the pressure against the outer portion of our thighs. Out under control, pause, back down 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale on exertion, back down 4, 3, 2, 1. As it is with any lower body exercise, we're going to do 1 to 3 sets of 10 to 15 repetitions, where the 15th repetition is very challenging. Let's assume that I've gotten to that position. Let's say I've got to 15 and I can't quite get the 16th repetition. I'm going to reach over to the weight stack, take the pin out, reduce it by about 25 or 30%, and continue to lift immediately. That allows us to make less weight, do more work, because we pre-fatigue that particular muscle on the first set. If we're using the quick set system, as we describe in the book, we would record the amount of repetitions we did on only the first set. Here we are with our second set, which is our first quick set. And it doesn't take very many repetitions before you start to feel a little bit of pressure right on the lateral part of the hip. A real simple way to do the lateral hip, called a hip abductor. And we'll show you one more way you can do it at home as soon as we finish another couple exercises. I'd like to show you a machine or a modality now that allows us to train each gluteal muscle, each butt cheek, one at a time. You remember at the beginning of our show when we were talking about hip training, I showed you that any movement that simulates this position going to this position involves the gluteals. Well, this is a machine that allows us to put resistance directly against it, and it's done in a very simple way. This is a hip extensor or leg extensor machine, and it's selectorized. You notice we have a weight stack here. We also can adjust the position of the chest post. It's easy to mount. All I'm going to do is I'm going to start on my left side. I'll put my right shin bone right on the pad. I'm going to end up putting my left foot inside the pedal. I'm going to lean forward, put my left foot right on the pedal, and I'm going to extend out, pause, and all the way back under control. That position for the hip should look pretty familiar. We're going to come up and then extend all the way out, and I'm able to put resistance against it. Because it's a lower body exercise, remember, we're going to do 1 to 3 sets of 10 to 15 repetitions to momentary fatigue. Whenever we reach fatigue, we can reach over, change the amount of resistance on the machine by about 25 to 30%, and continue to lift. Then, of course, we have to do the other side. So a leg extensor or hip extensor machine, a real simple way to train the hips and be able to put resistance against them. Now, I'd like to show you a couple of ways of doing both the hip abductor and the leg and hip extension machine over on the floor, and you can do it right in your own home. Let's go take a look. If you don't have access to a hip extensor machine or an abductor machine, or if you just missed your turn at the fitness center that day, let me show you a couple of ways to do those exercises at home. Let's start with the abductor exercise. Now remember, when we were on the machine, we were doing both hips at the same time. We were starting in the midline position and moving our hips out. And that was driving the resistance into the gluteus medius, which is the muscle on the side of the hip. We can simulate that at home. All we're going to do is lie on our side. We're going to brace ourselves with our elbow, stabilize our body by putting our hand in front of us, and I'm simply going to put both legs together, and here we go. Up under control, pause, and down slowly under control. I don't want to rest at the bottom. As soon as I touch, I want to come right back up. Under control, pause, and back down. You'll notice that as soon as we start to lift, it's the gluteus medius, which is the muscle on the side of our hip, that immediately comes into play. That's what's called the prime mover in this exercise. Up under control and down slowly. Once you can do 1 to 3 sets of 10 to 15 repetitions, in order to put a little bit more resistance, all we need to do is put a little bit of ankle weights on the side, and that makes it an even easier exercise. So that's our hip abductor, and obviously we have to turn over and do the other side, so it's a little bit of a disadvantage in terms of time. Now, the other exercise we did was the hip extender. You remember that one? We did single leg at a time, and that one was where we were training the gluteal muscle in extending the hip. We can also simulate that one here too. Here's how it works. We're going to start in this position on all fours. I've got 6 points of contact, my palms, my knees, and my toes on the floor. Now I'm going to bring my one knee up toward my chest. I'm going to extend all the way out, keep my head up, pause, and then back down slowly under control. Bring my knee all the way up to my chest, pause, and all the way up. Now you notice at no time am I going to stop and relax. I'm going to try to keep my gluteals under control all the time, making sure that I'm always keeping my buttocks muscle, my gluteals, under contraction time. We're going to be doing 1 to 3 sets of 10 to 15 repetitions. And when we get up to that top position, let's pause and stretch here, but let's go all the way up to that top position, really tighten it up a little bit, pause, and then back down under control. Once we get to the point where we can do 1 to 3 sets with just the resistance that comes from using our leg weight, we can actually add ankle weights. A couple of simple ways to do those exercises. So you can see there's lots of ways to train the hips. Whether you're in the fitness center or whether you're at home, we can always do good training for our hips, get them trimmed down and keep them tight. That's our show for the day. We'd really like to thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed that hip series. I know I did. And remember, to be fit, stay fit, America.